The Manhattan skyline glittered against the late afternoon sun as Vincent Romano stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. Below him, the city pulsed with life, a city he controlled from the shadows, where his word was law and his name commanded both respect and fear. He was 42 years old, built like a man who understood violence intimately, with salt and pepper hair and dark eyes that could freeze a man's blood with a single glance. But right now those eyes held something no one in his world would ever expect to see: fear. "Boss, the car's ready." Marco's voice came from behind him, his most trusted lieutenant and childhood friend. "We need to leave for Newark in 20 minutes if you want to make the flight." Vincent didn't turn around. "I know. You could still drive it. Miami's only 18 hours straight through. I'll get the guys. We'll make it comfortable." "No." Vincent's voice was firm, final. "This deal needs to happen tomorrow morning. Castellano won't wait, and I won't show weakness by asking for more time." He finally turned to face Marco, his jaw set with determination that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm getting on that damn plane." Marco studied his boss, the man he'd known since they were kids running numbers in Little Italy. He'd seen Vincent face down rival families, stare down FBI agents, walk into ambushes without flinching. But put him on an airplane and the most dangerous man in New York became someone else entirely. "It's just a couple hours," Marco offered quietly. "You've done it before." Vincent's hand tightened around the glass. "Doesn't make it easier." The drive to Newark Liberty International Airport felt too short. Vincent sat in the back of the black Mercedes SUV, watching the New Jersey landscape blur past, his breathing already becoming shallow. His father and older brother had died in a plane crash when Vincent was 19, a small charter plane that went down in a storm over Pennsylvania. Vincent had been supposed to be on that flight. A last-minute meeting had saved his life and cursed him with this irrational, consuming fear that no amount of power or control could eliminate. The airport was chaos. Families rushing with luggage, business travelers glued to their phones, the constant drone of announcements echoing through the terminal. Vincent moved through it all with his bodyguards flanking him, his expensive suit and cold demeanor creating an invisible barrier that made people instinctively step aside. But inside, his heart was already racing. At the first-class check-in, he dismissed his men. "Stay here. I'll call when I land." "Boss, let me at least come with you," Marco started. "No." Vincent's tone left no room for argument. He wouldn't have witnesses to his weakness, not even Marco. Some vulnerabilities were too dangerous to share in his world. The security line, the walk to the gate, the boarding process. Each step wound his anxiety tighter. By the time Vincent settled into seat 2A, his palms were sweating, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. The first-class cabin was mercifully empty, except for an older businessman across the aisle who was already asleep, and a young couple several rows back too absorbed in each other to notice anything else. Vincent gripped the armrests, his knuckles white, and forced himself to breathe. Just 2 hours and 43 minutes. He'd survived worse. He'd survived bullets and betrayals and— "Good evening, sir. Can I get you something to drink before we take off?" The voice was warm, professional, genuinely kind. Vincent looked up and found himself meeting a pair of gentle hazel eyes that seemed to actually see him, not just the expensive suit and cold exterior. The flight attendant was probably in her late 20s with light brown hair pulled back in a neat bun and a smile that somehow didn't feel manufactured. "Whiskey. Neat," Vincent managed, his voice rougher than intended. "Of course." She moved with practiced efficiency, returning moments later with his drink. As she handed it to him, her eyes lingered on his white-knuckled grip on the armrest. "First time flying?" "No." The word came out sharper than he meant. Then, surprisingly, he added, "Just not a fan." Her smile softened with understanding, not pity. "You're in good hands. Captain Morrison has been flying for 30 years. He could land this plane in his sleep." She leaned in slightly, conspiratorially, though the FAA probably wouldn't approve of that. Despite himself, Vincent felt his lips twitch. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. She noticed, and her own smile widened just a fraction before she moved to check on the other passengers. Her name tag read Emma, Vincent noticed as she walked away. He took a long drink of whiskey, feeling the burn, and tried to focus on anything other than the fact that the cabin door was now closing, sealing him inside this metal tube that would soon be hurtling through the air at 30,000 feet. The engines roared to life. Vincent's breathing became shallow, rapid. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape. The plane began to taxi, and every rational thought in his mind disappeared. replaced by pure, primal panic. He closed his eyes, but that made it worse. All he could see was fire and twisted metal and… "Excuse me, sir?" Emma was back, crouching slightly in the aisle beside his seat, her voice low and calm. "I'm going to need you to breathe with me, okay? In through your nose, hold for 4, out through your mouth. Can you do that?" Vincent opened his eyes, found hers and nodded. He felt foolish. He was Vincent Romano, for Christ's sake. But the plane was accelerating now, the nose beginning to lift, and nothing mattered except the anchor of her steady gaze. "In," she breathed, demonstrating. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Out. 2, 3, 4. Vincent followed, matching his breathing to hers. The plane lifted off the runway, climbing steeply, and his entire body went rigid. But Emma didn't leave. She stayed right there, breaking every protocol he was sure existed, her hand resting lightly on the armrest near his. "You're doing great," she said softly. "The hard part's almost over. Just a few more minutes until we level out." "How do you know?" Vincent forced out between breaths. "That you're doing great, or that we're almost level? That I wouldn't rather be anywhere else right now?" Emma's smile was gentle, knowing, "Because I've seen this before. My younger brother Danny, he has the same fear. We drove to my sister's wedding in California instead of flying because he just couldn't do it." She glanced out the window as the plane continued to climb. "But you're here. You got on the plane. That takes more courage than you probably think." The plane began to level out, the steep climb easing into a steady cruising altitude. Vincent's death grip on the armrest loosened fractionally. Emma stood, her hand briefly touching his shoulder, a gesture that should have made him tense but somehow didn't. "I'll check on you in a bit," she said. "And if you need anything at all, just press the call button. I'll be right here." For the next half hour, Vincent sat in his seat, sipping his whiskey and trying to regain some semblance of the control that defined his entire existence. Other passengers watched movies or worked on laptops, completely oblivious to the internal war he was fighting. Emma moved through the cabin with practiced grace, attending to everyone but somehow always aware of him, meeting his eyes with small, reassuring smiles each time she passed. Then the turbulence hit. It started as a small bump, the kind pilots always said was normal. But then the plane dropped, just a few feet, but enough to make Vincent's stomach lurch and his carefully constructed calm shatter completely. His whiskey glass fell from his hand, ice scattering across the floor. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and the captain's voice came over the intercom with practiced casualness about a bit of rough air, but Vincent couldn't hear any of it over the roaring in his ears, the crushing weight on his chest, the absolute certainty that the plane was going down and he was going to die just like his father and brother, trapped and helpless. And Emma appeared beside him again, this time sliding into the empty seat next to his without hesitation. "Vincent," she said, and the use of his name, his real name that he'd somehow given her during their brief exchange, cut through the panic. "Look at me. Right now, look at me." He did, his dark eyes wild with fear he couldn't control. "This is normal turbulence. The plane is designed for this. It's built to handle far worse than a few bumps. But I need you to breathe with me again, okay?" She took his hand, actually took his hand, her smaller fingers wrapping around his. In any other context with any other person, touching Vincent Romano without permission would be a dangerous mistake. But right now, her touch was the only thing keeping him from completely losing control. The plane bucked again, dropping sharply before catching itself. Vincent's grip on her hand tightened painfully, but Emma didn't flinch. "Tell me about why you're going to Miami," she said, her voice cutting through his panic with determined calm. "Business?" Yes." Vincent struggled to form words, to focus on anything other than the fact that they were going to crash. "What kind of business?" "Import. Export." The lie came automatically, even through his fear. "Meeting with potential partners. Sounds important. They must be pretty significant partners if you're willing to face this." Her thumb stroked across the back of his hand, a small grounding gesture. "And you'll need to be sharp for that meeting, right? Can't show up looking like you've been through a war." Despite everything, Vincent almost laughed. If she only knew how many actual wars he'd been through. The turbulence continued, but with Emma beside him talking in that steady, calm voice, it became bearable. She told him about her daughter Lily, 6 years old and obsessed with dinosaurs. She talked about growing up in Ohio, how she'd always wanted to see the world and being a flight attendant was her way of doing it, while supporting her daughter as a single mom. Her father? Vincent found himself asking. the question coming out before he could stop it. Emma's smile turned sad. Wasn't ready to be a dad. Left when I was 4 months pregnant. His loss, though. Lily's the best thing that ever happened to me. There was strength in her voice, a quiet resilience that Vincent recognized because he saw it in himself. Different circumstances, different worlds, but the same core of steel that refused to break. The turbulence finally eased, the plane smoothing out into steady flight. The captain's voice came back on, apologizing for the rough patch and promising clear skies ahead. Emma squeezed Vincent's hand once more before releasing it. See? Told you we'd make it through. Vincent looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something shift inside him that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the woman who'd sat with him through his worst moment, without judgment or fear. In his world, people either feared him or wanted something from him. Emma Carter seemed to be neither. Thank you, he said quietly. I'm not. It's okay, Emma said, standing and smoothing her uniform. Everyone has something they're afraid of. Yours just happens to be more visible up here. She gestured around the cabin. The brave thing is getting on the plane anyway. For the rest of the flight, Vincent found himself watching Emma as she worked. The way she made every passenger feel cared for, the genuine warmth in her interactions, the competence in every movement. When she brought him another whiskey, without him asking, their fingers brushed, and he felt that spark again. It wasn't just attraction, though that was certainly there. It was something more dangerous. Interest. Connection. As the plane began its descent into Miami, Vincent felt his anxiety spike again. But this time Emma caught his eye from across the cabin and mouthed, "You've got this." And somehow, that was enough. The landing was smooth. As passengers began gathering their belongings, Emma approached him one final time. She handed him a small piece of paper with a phone number written in neat handwriting. "In case you need any flying tips for the return trip," she said, her professional smile not quite hiding the warmth in her eyes. "Or if you just want to talk. Either way." Vincent took the paper, their fingers touching briefly. "Emma, I know this probably breaks about 17 different airline policies," she said quickly, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "But you're not just any passenger, are you? There's something about you. Something that should probably make you run the other way," Vincent said, more honestly than he'd intended. Emma tilted her head, studying him with those perceptive hazel eyes. "Maybe, but I've always been better at moving toward things than away from them, even scary things." Her smile turned playful, like grumpy mafia bosses who are afraid of flying. Vincent's expression must have shown his shock because Emma laughed softly. "The expensive suit, the bodyguards in the terminal, the way you carry yourself like you own everything you see, and that scar above your eyebrow that definitely didn't come from a business meeting. I'm observant. It's part of the job." She touched his arm lightly. "But I also saw the man underneath all that, the one who was brave enough to be vulnerable. That's the one I'm giving my number to." Before Vincent could respond, she was gone, swept up in the deplaning process and her professional duties. He sat there for a moment, the paper with her number in his hand, feeling like he'd just experienced something more dangerous than any firefight or negotiation. Marco was waiting for him at the arrival gate, his sharp eyes taking in Vincent's slightly disheveled appearance, the piece of paper he was holding. "Everything okay, boss?" Vincent pocketed the number and straightened his tie, the armor of Vincent Romano sliding back into place. "Fine, let's go. We have a meeting in 3 hours and I need to prepare." But as they walked through the Miami airport, Vincent found himself thinking not about the arms deal waiting for him, not about territories or power or control. He was thinking about hazel eyes and a warm smile, about a woman who'd held his hand through turbulence without knowing she'd started a completely different kind of storm in his carefully controlled world. The piece of paper in his pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. And Vincent Romano, who never hesitated, who always knew exactly what he wanted and took it without question, found himself paralyzed by a simple decision, whether to call the flight attendant who'd seen through his armor and made him feel for just a few hours like a man instead of a monster. 7 days after landing in Miami, Vincent Romano found himself doing something he'd sworn he'd never do, deliberately booking another flight. The business with Castellano had concluded successfully, a new distribution network established, territories negotiated, money flowing where it needed to flow. He could have driven back to New York, could have sent Marco in his place for the follow-up meeting he'd hastily arranged. But instead he sat in his Miami hotel suite at 2 in the morning, staring at his laptop screen, booking a first-class ticket on the exact same flight, the exact same airline. He told himself it was practical. Facing his fear again would make the next necessary flight easier. But the piece of paper with Emma's number, now worn from being touched too many times, told a different story. Marco leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching his boss with unconcealed concern. "You're playing with fire, Vince. I'm taking a flight home. That's all." "Right. And I'm the Pope." Marco moved into the room, his voice dropping. "In 30 years I've never seen you book the same flight twice. You avoid flying like it's the plague and suddenly you're eager to get back on a plane?" He shook his head. "This is about the flight attendant." Vincent's silence was answer enough. "You can't do this." Marco continued, his tone urgent now. "You can't bring a civilian into our world. You know what happens." "I'm not bringing her into anything." Vincent cut him off, his voice hard. "It's a flight. Maybe coffee. Nothing more." But even as he said it, Vincent knew it was a lie. He'd thought about Emma every single day since that flight. Her calm voice, her fearless kindness, the way she'd seen past everything he used to keep people at arm's length. He'd picked up his phone to call her at least a dozen times, then stopped himself each time because Marco was right. Getting close to him was dangerous. People in his life ended up as leverage, as targets, as collateral damage. But apparently, staying away from her was proving impossible. The flight from Miami to Newark departed at 2:15 p.m. on Thursday. Vincent arrived at the airport early, his heart rate already elevated, though whether from fear of flying or anticipation of seeing Emma again, he couldn't say. He moved through security, boarded the plane and settled into seat 2A, the same seat as before, and then Emma appeared, walking through the first-class cabin checking seat assignments, and their eyes met. The surprise on her face was genuine, quickly followed by a smile that lit up her entire expression. "Well, hello again. Welcome aboard, Mr." She glanced at the passenger manifest in her hand, her smile turning playful. "Vincent Moretti, is it? Or should I call you Vincent Romano?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "You looked me up. I'm cautious. Single mom, remember?" Emma's voice was low, meant only for him. And what I found was interesting. Vincent Romano. Businessman, philanthropist, suspiciously vague about what exactly he imports and exports. Also several sealed court records and a whole lot of rumors. She leaned in slightly. "You didn't call. I thought it would be better if I didn't." "For who? You or me?" Before Vincent could answer, she straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place as other passengers began boarding. "We'll talk later. And yes, I'm working this flight. Universe has a sense of humor, doesn't it?" The next 2 hours were torture. But not because of the flying. Vincent was hyper-aware of Emma's every movement through the cabin, the way she laughed with the elderly woman in 3C, the efficiency with which she handled a demanding passenger in first class, the occasional glances she threw his way that made his chest tighten in ways that had nothing to do with fear. The takeoff was easier this time. Vincent still gripped the armrest, still fought the urge to panic, but he kept his eyes on Emma as she went through the safety demonstration, and somehow that anchored him. She knew it too. He could see it in the small, encouraging smile she gave him when the plane began to climb. Halfway through the flight during the beverage service, Emma paused at his seat. "So, Miami business concluded successfully?" "For the most part." Vague answer. "Very on brand for you." She poured him a whiskey without asking. "You know what I think? I think you're on this flight because of me." Vincent met her eyes, deciding that honesty, or at least partial honesty, was the only way forward. "You're right. I booked this flight because I wanted to see you again, even though you think staying away would be better. Apparently I'm not as disciplined as I thought." Emma's smile softened. "Good, because I've been waiting for you to call all week and I'm not usually the waiting type." She glanced around the cabin, then back at him. "I get off at 5 when we land. There's a coffee shop in Terminal C. If you're interested in taking me up on that conversation, I'll be there at 5:30. "Emma, I know you're dangerous, Vincent. I'm not naive, but I also know that the man who held my hand during turbulence, who was brave enough to show fear, is someone worth getting to know." She touched his shoulder briefly, a gesture that seemed intimate despite the public setting. "But it's your choice. I'll wait 30 minutes. After that, I'll assume you made the smart decision to stay away." The landing in Newark came too quickly. Vincent deplaned with the other first-class passengers, but instead of heading immediately to baggage claim where Marco would be waiting, he found himself walking toward Terminal C. He told himself he was just going to explain to Emma why this couldn't happen, why being around him was dangerous, why she should forget she ever met him. But when he found the coffee shop and saw her sitting at a corner table, still in her uniform, her hair now loose around her shoulders, all his carefully prepared explanations evaporated. Emma looked up as he approached, and her smile was worth every risk he knew he was taking. "You came," she said simply, "against my better judgment." Vincent sat down across from her, acutely aware of how exposed he felt in this public space, how anyone could be watching. "Emma, you need to understand something about me. You're involved in organized crime," she said matter-of-factly, sipping her coffee. "Probably pretty high up given the suit and the bodyguards and the way you carry yourself. You're dangerous, you have enemies, and getting close to you could put me and my daughter at risk." She set down her cup and leaned forward. "Did I miss anything?" Vincent stared at her. "And you're sitting here anyway? I'm a single mom working as a flight attendant, trying to save enough money to go back to school to become a nurse. I'm 29 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens that I can barely afford, and my ex hasn't paid child support in 3 years. Emma's voice was steady, unflinching. "My life isn't safe, Vincent. It's never been safe. I'm one medical emergency, one layoff, one disaster away from losing everything. So when you talk about danger, I need you to understand that I'm already living with it. Just a different kind. This is different. Maybe. But here's what I know. I've met a lot of men in my life. Most of them want something from me, or they're intimidated by the fact that I have a daughter, or they can't handle that I'm not some damsel in distress." She held his gaze. "You looked at me like I was the one saving you, not the other way around. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Vincent felt something crack in his chest, some wall he'd built years ago starting to crumble. "I could get you killed. We could all die tomorrow. Car accident, cancer, bad luck." Emma reached across the table and took his hand, the same way she had on the plane. "I'm not saying I want to jump into your world with both feet. I'm saying I want to have coffee with you. Maybe dinner. Get to know the man behind the reputation." Her thumb stroked across his knuckles. "And maybe you get to know me, the real me, not just the flight attendant who calmed you down." They talked for 2 hours. Emma told him about Lily, how she loved dinosaurs and wanted to be a paleontologist, how she asked questions constantly, how being her mother was the hardest and best thing Emma had ever done. She talked about her dreams of becoming a nurse, of providing stability for her daughter, of finally feeling like she was building something real. Vincent found himself sharing more than he'd intended. He talked about growing up in Little Italy, about his father's expectations and his brother's shadow. He spoke vaguely about his business, but with more honesty than he'd given anyone outside his organization. He even told her about the plane crash, about the survivor's guilt that had morphed into this irrational fear that controlled him. "It's not irrational," Emma said softly. "You lost the 2 most important people in your life. That kind of trauma doesn't just disappear. I've done therapy, medication, nothing works. Maybe because you're trying to eliminate the fear instead of accepting it." She squeezed his hand. "You got on that plane, Vincent. Twice now. That's not weakness, that's strength." When they finally left the coffee shop, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Vincent walked Emma to her car, hyper-aware of his surroundings, already cataloging potential threats out of habit. "Can I see you again?" he asked when they reached her car, a 10-year-old Honda that had seen better days. "I was hoping you'd ask." Emma pulled out her phone. "Give me your real number this time, not whatever burner phone number you were probably going to give me." Despite himself, Vincent smiled. "You're too perceptive for your own good. Survival skill." She programmed his number into her phone, then looked up at him. "But Vincent, if we do this, if we really try this, I need you to be honest with me. I can handle dangerous. I can handle complicated, but I can't handle lies. I'll tell you everything I can," Vincent said carefully. "But there are some things. For your safety, for Lily's safety, there are things you're better off not knowing." Emma studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, I can live with that. For now." She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, a brief, warm gesture that sent electricity through his entire body. Then she was in her car, pulling away, leaving Vincent standing in the parking garage feeling like he'd just made either the best or worst decision of his life. His phone buzzed. "Marco, where the hell are you? Been waiting for 2 hours." Vincent typed back. Something came up. "Get the car. Terminal C parking." Over the next 2 weeks, Vincent saw Emma whenever he could, which, given their conflicting schedules and his need for discretion, wasn't nearly as often as he wanted. They met for coffee in quiet neighborhoods far from his usual territory. They walked through Central Park on a Wednesday afternoon when Emma had a rare day off. They talked on the phone late at night, her voice becoming the last thing he heard before sleeping. Emma introduced him to Lily via video call, a 6-year-old with her mother's hazel eyes and an endless supply of dinosaur facts. Vincent, who terrified grown men with a look, found himself listening intently as Lily explained the difference between a velociraptor and a Deinonychus, and felt something in his chest tighten when she asked if Mommy's friend Vincent could come to her school's career day to talk about his import business. Maybe someday, Emma had said, catching Vincent's panicked expression. Mr. Vincent travels a lot for work, sweetie. His men noticed the change. Vincent was distracted during meetings, checking his phone more frequently, leaving the office at reasonable hours instead of working until midnight. Marco pulled him aside after a tense negotiation with a union boss who controlled the ports. "You're slipping, Vince," Marco said bluntly. 3 times today you weren't listening. Tony noticed. Sal noticed. And if they're noticing, so is everyone else. The deal got done. That's not the point. The point is you're not yourself, and in our world that's dangerous. Marco's expression was serious, worried. "I know you care about this woman, but you need to make a choice. Either end it now, clean break, or what? Or bring her all the way in. Make it official. Put protection on her and the kid. Because right now, you're in the worst possible position. Close enough to care, not careful enough to keep her safe." Vincent knew Marco was right. He also knew that every day he spent with Emma was a day his enemies could be watching, cataloging his weakness, planning how to exploit it. The decision was made for him 2 days later. Vincent was in a meeting at one of his legitimate businesses, a high-end car dealership in Manhattan that laundered money through luxury vehicle sales, when his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He normally wouldn't answer, but something made him step out of the meeting. "Hello? Vincent?" Emma's voice was tight with tension. "I'm sorry to call, but I need to know something, and I need the truth." His entire body went on alert. "What happened?" "A man approached me outside my apartment building 20 minutes ago. Big guy, tattoos, Eastern European accent. He said to tell Vincent Romano that Dmitry Volkov knows where I live." Her voice shook slightly. "Who is Dmitry Volkov, and why does he know about me?" Vincent felt ice flood his veins. "Where are you right now? Are you somewhere safe?" "I'm in my apartment with Lily, doors locked, but Vincent, what is—" "Stay there. Don't open the door for anyone. I'm sending people to you right now. They'll be there in 15 minutes. Marco Rossetti will knock 3 times, pause, then twice. Don't open the door for anyone else." "Vincent, you're scaring me." "I know. I'm sorry. But you and Lily are about to have some very serious protection." He was already moving, gesturing sharply to Marco, who immediately pulled out his phone. "Emma, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" A pause. Then, "Yes. I'll be there within the hour, and then I'll explain everything." Vincent hung up and turned to Marco, his expression harder than forged steel. "Dmitry knows about Emma. He approached her. Get 6 of our best men to her apartment in Queens immediately. Full protection detail. And find out how the hell he found out about her in the first place." Marco was already making calls, his face grim. "This is exactly what I was afraid of, Vince." "I know." Vincent grabbed his jacket, his mind already racing through scenarios, contingencies, ways to keep Emma and Lily safe. "Which is why it ends now. Emma's under our protection, full time, until I deal with Dmitry." He paused at the door, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "And then I'm going to make sure he regrets ever saying her name." As Vincent raced toward Queens, traffic blurring around him, one thought pounded through his mind. He'd tried to stay away from Emma to keep her safe, but in his world, even trying to protect someone could mark them as a target. Now the only way to keep her alive was to bring her fully into the shadows he'd spent his life building. Vincent arrived at Emma's apartment building in Queens 35 minutes after her call, his Mercedes screeching to a stop in front of the modest brick structure that looked nothing like the world he inhabited. 2 of his men were already positioned at the building's entrance, another watching from a black SUV across the street. Marco met him at the door, his expression grim. "Building secure. I've got men on all exits and 2 inside the hallway. No sign of Volkov's people since the initial approach." Marco's jaw was tight. "But boss, they know where she lives. They know about the kid. This is—" "I know what this is." Vincent cut him off, his voice like ice. He moved past Marco toward the entrance, then paused. "How bad is the panic?" "She's holding it together. Tough woman." Marco's expression softened slightly. The little girl doesn't know anything's wrong. Emma told her the men outside are friends of yours helping with a surprise. Vincent took the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor, where another of his men stood guard outside apartment 3F. The door opened before he could knock, and Emma stood there, her face pale but composed, her eyes searching his face for answers she was afraid to hear. "Hi," she said, her voice steadier than he expected. "Hi." Vincent stepped inside, taking in the small apartment with its second-hand furniture and child's drawings taped to the walls. Lily sat on the couch watching cartoons, a stuffed triceratops clutched in her arms, oblivious to the danger that had just invaded their lives. Emma closed the door and led him to the kitchen, out of Lily's earshot. The moment they were alone, her composure cracked. "Tell me the truth, Vincent, all of it. Who is Dmitry Volkov and what does he want with me?" Vincent pulled out a chair at her small kitchen table and sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. For a long moment he just looked at her, this woman who'd seen something in him worth caring about, who'd given him her number and her trust, who was now sitting in her kitchen with armed guards outside because of him. "Dmitry Volkov runs the Russian syndicate in Brooklyn," Vincent began, his voice low and controlled. "We've been competitors for territory for the past 5 years. It's been mostly Cold War, small skirmishes, negotiations, maintaining boundaries." He paused, his jaw tightening. 3 weeks ago he made a move on one of my distribution networks. I pushed back. Hard. He lost money and face with his organization. And now he's retaliating by threatening me. Emma finished, her face paling further. "He's sending a message, showing me he can get to the people I care about." Vincent's hands clenched on the table. "Emma, I need you to understand something. In my world, caring about someone makes them a target. I tried to stay away from you for this exact reason, but I was selfish. I wanted to see you. And now I'm leverage." Emma's voice was surprisingly steady. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below where Vincent's men were positioned. "How long have we been watched?" "I don't know. Could have been days. Could have been since that first flight." Vincent stood as well, moving to stand beside her. "But it doesn't matter now. What matters is keeping you and Lily safe. And how do we do that? You come with me, tonight. I have a place, a penthouse in Manhattan, security better than most banks. You stay there until I deal with Dmitry." Emma turned to face him, her hazel eyes fierce. "And then what? I just hide every time someone threatens you? Vincent, I have a job. Lily has school. We have a life that Dmitry Volkov now knows everything about." Vincent interrupted, his voice harsh. "Emma, this isn't a negotiation. That man outside your building today, that was a warning. Next time it won't be just a message, it'll be—" He stopped himself, not wanting to finish that sentence in front of her. Emma's hand came up to her mouth, fear finally breaking through her composure. "Oh God, Lily, if something happened to her because of me, because I was stupid enough to—" "Don't." Vincent pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her tightly. "This isn't your fault, it's mine. I should have stayed away. I should have been stronger. But I'm going to fix this, Emma. I'm going to make sure you're both safe. I promise you that." She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. How do you fix something like this?" Vincent's expression went cold, dangerous. "I remind Dmitry Volkov why people fear my name, and I make sure he never forgets it." 2 hours later, Emma and Lily were installed in Vincent's penthouse, a sprawling apartment on the Upper East Side with floor-to-ceiling windows, security systems that would make the Pentagon jealous, and armed guards rotating shifts in the hallway. Lily thought it was an adventure, running from room to room exclaiming over the size of everything while Emma stood in the massive living room looking like she'd stepped onto another planet. "This is where you live?" she asked, taking in the expensive furniture, the original artwork, the view of Central Park spread out below them. "It's where I sleep sometimes," Vincent said, setting down their hastily packed bags. "Most nights I'm working. But it's secure, Emma. No one gets in here without going through me first." "It's a prison," she said quietly. "A beautiful, expensive prison, but still, it's temporary. Is it?" Emma turned to face him, her arms crossed. "Or is this what my life looks like now? Hiding in safe houses, armed guards looking over my shoulder forever?" Vincent didn't have an answer that wouldn't be a lie, so he said nothing. The truth was, once you were marked in his world, you never really stopped being a target. The best you could do was make the cost of attacking you too high to be worth it. "Mommy, there's a whole room just for toys." Lily came running back into the living room, her earlier fear forgotten in childhood excitement. And Mr. Vincent has a dinosaur book collection. Can we stay here forever? Emma's smile was pained. We'll see, baby. For now, how about we get you ready for bed? It's been a long day. After Lily was tucked into one of the guest bedrooms, a room larger than Emma's entire apartment, with its own bathroom and a bed that seemed to swallow the little girl, Emma found Vincent standing at the windows, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the city he controlled. Tell me about Dimitri, she said, coming to stand beside him. If I'm going to be caught in the middle of this, I deserve to know what I'm up against. Vincent took a long drink before answering. Dmitry Volkov is ruthless, ambitious, and smart. He came up through the Bratva, Russian organized crime in Brighton Beach, built his operation through violence and intimidation. He glanced at her. He's also a sadist who enjoys hurting people, especially women. 3 years ago, a rival boss's girlfriend left him and went to work in one of Dimitri's clubs. Dimitri sent her back in pieces. Emma's face went white. And that's who knows where my daughter sleeps. That's who knew where your daughter sleeps, Vincent corrected, his voice hard. He'll never get within a mile of either of you again. I've made sure of that. By doing what? Starting a war? If that's what it takes. Vincent set down his glass and turned to face her fully. Emma, you need to understand something. In my world, weakness is death. If I let Dimitri threaten you and do nothing, every enemy I have will see you as an easy target. The only way to protect you is to show that touching you means war. Complete, total, devastating war. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Then she asked, have you killed people, Vincent? He could have lied, should have lied, but he'd promised her honesty. Yes. How many? I stopped counting a long time ago. She should have been horrified, should have grabbed Lily and run as far from him as possible. Instead, Emma just nodded slowly, like she was fitting together pieces of a puzzle she'd known existed but hadn't wanted to see. The man on the plane, the one who was terrified and vulnerable, is he real, or was that an act? He's real, Vincent said quietly. More real than almost anything else in my life. You saw something in me that day that I'd forgotten existed. The part of me that's still just a man, not a monster. That's why I couldn't stay away from you, Emma. You made me feel human again. Tears slipped down Emma's cheeks. I don't know if I can do this, Vincent. I don't know if I'm strong enough to live in your world. You're stronger than you think. You've survived as a single mother in New York City, working a demanding job while trying to save for school. You've dealt with an absent ex-partner, financial stress, and the weight of being everything to your daughter. Vincent reached out and gently wiped away her tears. You've been fighting your own war for years, Emma. This one just has different weapons. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. What happens now? Now you stay here where you're safe. I deal with Dimitri. And then, he paused, not sure how to finish that sentence because he didn't know what came after. A future with Emma meant bringing her fully into his world, with all its darkness and danger. Walking away meant leaving her vulnerable to anyone who wanted to hurt him through her. And then we figure out if there's any way this can actually work. Emma finished for him. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with determination. Because, Vincent, I need you to know something. I'm terrified right now. Absolutely terrified. But I'm not sorry I met you. Even with everything that's happening, I'm not sorry. Vincent kissed her then, pulling her against him with a desperation that came from weeks of restraint and the knowledge that he'd almost lost her before he'd really had her. Emma responded with equal intensity, her hands fisting in his shirt, her body pressed against his like she was trying to merge them into one person. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Emma rested her forehead against his chest. Don't get yourself killed dealing with Dimitri. I didn't just upend my entire life to lose you to some Russian gangster with a grudge. I don't plan to. Vincent's arms tightened around her. I'm very good at what I do, Emma. Dimitri's about to be reminded of that. Over the next 3 days, Emma and Lily settled into a strange new routine in Vincent's penthouse. Lily went to a private school near the apartment, one with security that rivaled the White House, driven there and back by Vincent's men. Emma couldn't work her flights, but Vincent had already spoken to her airline, using his influence to ensure her job would be waiting when this was over. During the day, while Lily was at school, Emma explored the penthouse, finding evidence of Vincent's life scattered throughout. Books on philosophy and military strategy, a worn photo of him as a teenager with 2 older men who had to be his father and brother, medical textbooks, the kind used to treat gunshot wounds and knife injuries. She also met Maria Romano, Vincent's mother, who arrived unannounced on the 3rd day with enough Italian food to feed an army. Maria was in her late 60s, dressed in elegant black, with shrewd dark eyes that missed nothing. "So you're the flight attendant my Vincent can't stop thinking about," Maria said in accented English, looking Emma up and down appraisingly. "Pretty, strong face, good hips for babies." Emma nearly choked on her espresso. "Mrs. Romano, Call me Maria, and don't be embarrassed. My Vincent, he's been alone too long. Always working, always carrying the weight of our family. He needs someone who sees the boy I raised, not just the man he became." Maria patted Emma's hand. "You're good for him. I can tell, even though I'm putting him in danger, even though Dmitri Volkov is a pig who will be dealt with," Maria said dismissively. "And you're not putting my son in danger. He chose this life long before he met you. But you give him something to live for beyond duty and loyalty. That's a gift, Kara." When Lily came home from school, Maria doted on her, teaching her to make pasta and telling stories about Vincent as a boy that made Emma see him in an entirely new light. The child who'd been afraid of the dark, who'd cried when his pet turtle died, who'd wanted to be a teacher before his father's expectations crushed that dream. Vincent came home late each night, usually after midnight. His suit sometimes spattered with blood he tried to hide. He wouldn't talk about what he was doing, but Emma could see the toll it was taking, the lines of stress around his eyes, the way his jaw stayed clenched even in sleep. On the 5th night, Emma woke to find him standing at the window again, that same glass of whiskey in his hand. She got out of bed and wrapped a blanket around herself before joining him. "Can't sleep?" she asked quietly. "I'm meeting with Dmitri tomorrow," Vincent said without preamble. "Face to face. Negotiation." Emma's blood went cold. "That's a trap. You know that's a trap." "Probably, but it's also the only way to end this without a full-scale war that would put dozens of families at risk." He turned to look at her, his expression softer than she'd seen it in days. "Emma, if something happens to me, don't you dare start saying goodbye. If something happens to me," he continued firmly, "Marco will take care of you and Lily. He has instructions. Money set aside, protection. You'll be safe." "I don't want your money or your protection from Marco," Emma said fiercely. "I want you, alive, coming back from this meeting and figuring out how we make this insane situation work." She grabbed his face in both hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You told me on the plane that getting on despite fear is what makes you brave. So be brave tomorrow, Vincent. Be brave and come back to me." Vincent kissed her forehead, pulling her against him. "I've faced down federal investigations, rival families, and attempted coups within my own organization. But the thought of not coming back to you, that terrifies me more than anything." They stood there together, watching the city lights flicker in the darkness, both knowing that tomorrow would change everything. Either Vincent would neutralize the threat and they'd have a chance at some kind of future together, or Dmitri Volkov would make good on his threat and Emma would lose the man who'd somehow become essential to her in just a few weeks. "Tell me about the meeting," Emma said finally. "Where? When? Who's going with you?" "Warehouse on the docks in Red Hook. 2 p.m. Me, Marco, and 5 of my best men." Vincent's voice was calm, professional, but Emma could feel the tension in his body. "Dmitri will have twice that number at least. The terms are simple. He stays out of my territory, I stay out of his, and you and Lily are completely off limits to everyone. And if he doesn't agree?" Vincent's smile was cold, dangerous. "Then I make him agree, permanently." Emma shivered, not entirely from fear. This was the other side of Vincent Romano, the ruthless mafia boss who'd built an empire through violence and intimidation. She should have been repulsed. Instead, she felt a fierce pride that this dangerous man was willing to go to war to protect her and her daughter. "I love you," she said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I know it's too soon and I know this is crazy, but I love you, Vincent. And I need you to know that before you walk into whatever hell is waiting tomorrow." Vincent went very still, his dark eyes searching her face like he was trying to memorize every detail. "Emma, you don't have to say it back, I just needed you to know." She stood on her toes and kissed him, pouring everything she felt into that kiss, fear and hope and desperate love for a man she barely knew but understood in ways that defied logic. When they broke apart, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I've never said those words to anyone who wasn't blood. Never thought I could. But you, Emma Carter, you make me want to be more than what I am. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me." He kissed her again, gently this time, So when I come back tomorrow, remind me of this feeling, because I'm going to need it to be brave." They went back to bed, holding each other in the darkness, both praying to gods they weren't sure they believed in, that tomorrow wouldn't be the end of something that had barely begun. The next morning, Vincent kissed Lily goodbye while she ate breakfast, ruffling her hair and promising to bring her a new dinosaur book. He held Emma for a long moment at the door, his arms tight around her, neither of them wanting to let go. "Be brave," she whispered against his chest. "Always," he promised. And then he was gone, walking toward a meeting that would either secure their future or destroy it completely, leaving Emma standing in the doorway of his penthouse with her heart in her throat, and her daughter asking why Mr. Vincent looked so sad. The warehouse in Red Hook stood like a tombstone against the gray Brooklyn sky, its corrugated metal walls streaked with rust and decades of neglect. Vincent arrived at exactly 2 p.m., Marco at his side and 5 of his most trusted men fanned out behind them. The air smelled of salt water and oil from the nearby docks, and the only sound was the distant cry of seagulls and the crunch of gravel under their feet. "This feels wrong," Marco muttered, his hand resting on the gun concealed beneath his jacket. "Too quiet, too exposed." "It's supposed to feel wrong," Vincent replied, his eyes scanning the warehouse's perimeter. "Dimitri wants us nervous, off balance." He straightened his tie, his expression calm despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. "Let's not give him the satisfaction." They entered through the main door, and Vincent immediately cataloged everything. The positions of Dimitri's men along the catwalks above, the exits blocked by armed guards, the way the afternoon light streamed through broken windows creating pockets of shadow perfect for concealing weapons. Dimitri had at least 15 men present, maybe more hidden. Vincent's 6 against that many were bad odds, but he'd survived worse. Dmitri Volkov stood in the center of the empty warehouse floor, a stocky man in his early 50s with a shaved head and cold blue eyes that held no warmth, no humanity. He wore an expensive suit that couldn't hide the violence embedded in his movements, the casual way he held power over the men surrounding him. "Vincent Romano," Dmitri said in heavily accented English, spreading his arms in mock welcome. "You actually came. I thought maybe you'd send Marco instead. Hide behind your men like always." "I don't hide from anyone, Dmitri. You wanted a meeting, you got one." Vincent stopped 10 feet away, close enough to talk but far enough to react if things went bad. "Let's talk about Emma Carter and why your men approached her." Dimitri's smile was cruel. "Ah yes, the flight attendant. Pretty woman. Sweet little daughter too. Lily, isn't it? 6 years old, loves dinosaurs, attends PS 114 in Queens." He watched Vincent's expression darken with satisfaction. "You see, Vincent, I know everything about your weakness. Where she lives, where she works, where the child goes to school. I could reach them any time I want." Every muscle in Vincent's body tensed, but he kept his voice level. "You won't touch them, won't I?" Dimitri circled slowly, like a predator assessing prey. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me controlling interest in your port operations. You're going to withdraw from the Brooklyn territories you've been encroaching on. And you're going to pay me $2 million in reparations for the damage you've caused my business." He stopped circling, facing Vincent directly. "Or I hurt your pretty flight attendant in ways that will make her beg for death. Then I do the same to her daughter while you watch." The warehouse went silent except for the sound of breathing and the distant rumble of traffic. Vincent's men tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Marco's face had gone white with rage, but Vincent just stared at Dimitri with an expression that made the temperature in the room drop. "That's your offer?" Vincent asked quietly. "That's my offer. Then here's mine." Vincent's voice was soft, deadly. "You leave New York. Tonight. Take your organization and disappear to whatever hole you crawled out of. Because if you ever say Emma's name again, if you even think about her or her daughter, I will burn your entire world to the ground. I will kill everyone you've ever cared about. And I will make sure you live long enough to see it all turn to ash." Dimitri laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the metal walls. "You think you scare me? You think—" The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Dimitri stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder where Vincent's bullet had torn through muscle and bone. Vincent's gun was already trained on Dimitri's head before any of the Russians' men could react, and Marco and the others had their weapons drawn, creating a Mexican standoff that could turn into a bloodbath in seconds. "I'm not making a threat, Dimitri," Vincent said, his voice still eerily calm. "I'm telling you how this ends. You made a mistake when you involved Emma. You thought she was my weakness, but she's the reason I'm willing to start a war that will leave half of Brooklyn burning." He cocked the hammer on his gun. So let me ask you again. Do you really want to find out how far I'll go to protect her? For the first time, fear flickered in Dimitri's eyes. He was bleeding, surrounded by his own men, but knowing that Vincent Romano's reputation wasn't built on empty threats. The man who'd just shot him had orchestrated hits on federal witnesses, had eliminated entire rival organizations, had survived 3 decades in a world where most men didn't last 3 years. You're insane, Dimitri gasped, pressing his hand against his wounded shoulder. No, I'm in love. There's a difference. Vincent's finger tightened on the trigger. What's it going to be? Before Dimitri could answer, the warehouse exploded with motion. FBI agents in tactical gear burst through every entrance, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Vincent's men dropped their guns immediately, hands raised. But several of Dimitri's men tried to fight, resulting in a brief, violent exchange that left 2 of them bleeding on the concrete floor. Within minutes, the warehouse was secured. Dmitri Volkov was being handcuffed by federal agents, screaming about setup and betrayal. His men were being lined up against the wall for arrest. And Vincent stood calmly in the center of it all, his gun already holstered, his hands raised cooperatively as an FBI agent approached him. Agent Sarah Mitchell, Organized Crime Task Force, the woman said, holstering her own weapon. Mr. Romano, thank you for your cooperation. Marco's eyes went wide. Boss, what the hell? I've been working with the FBI for 6 months, Vincent said quietly, his eyes still on Dimitri as the Russian was dragged away. Immunity deal in exchange for information on Dimitri's organization and several other targets. He turned to Marco, his expression apologetic. I couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell anyone. It was the only way. You've been working with the feds? Marco looked like his entire world had just shifted on its axis. Vincent, do you understand what this means? When the families find out, they'll know I was willing to become a rat to protect someone I love, Vincent finished. They'll know I chose Emma over the code, over tradition, over everything we've built. He pulled out his phone, texting someone. And they'll know that I'm done, Marco. I'm out. This was my exit strategy. Agent Mitchell stepped closer, lowering her voice. Mr. Romano's cooperation has allowed us to dismantle one of the largest human trafficking networks on the East Coast. In exchange, we've agreed to immunity from prosecution for past crimes and assistance in legitimizing his business operations. She glanced at Marco. You're also covered under the deal, Mr. Rossetti. All of you are, provided you cooperate with the transition. Marco looked between Vincent and the FBI agent, processing this revelation. How long have you been planning this? Years, Vincent admitted. Since my mother got sick and I realized I didn't want this life anymore. But I never had a good enough reason to actually pull the trigger until... He stopped, looking at his phone as a text came through. From Emma. Be brave. Come back to me. Until her... Marco finished, understanding dawning on his face. He shook his head, a reluctant smile forming. You crazy bastard. You burned your entire world down for a flight attendant you met 3 weeks ago. Best decision I ever made. Emma paced the penthouse living room for 4 hours, her phone clutched in her hand. Lily playing quietly with blocks in the corner. Every time footsteps sounded in the hallway, Emma's heart jumped into her throat. Every minute that passed without word felt like an eternity. When the door finally opened, Emma nearly collapsed with relief. Vincent walked in, his suit slightly disheveled, a cut on his cheek she hadn't noticed that morning, but alive and whole. She ran to him, throwing her arms around him, not caring about the blood or the danger or anything except that he'd come back like he promised. You're okay, she breathed against his chest. Thank God you're okay. I'm okay. Vincent held her tightly, burying his face in her hair. It's over, Emma. Dimitri's in federal custody. He won't ever touch you or Lily. I made sure of it. How? What happened? Vincent pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. I made a deal with the FBI 6 months ago. Information, cooperation, testimony. Everything they needed to take down Dimitri and others like him. In exchange, immunity, and a way out of this life. He searched her eyes, afraid of what he might find there. I became an informant, Emma. In my world, that makes me the worst kind of traitor. But it was the only way I could guarantee your safety and have any chance at a real future. Emma stared at him, processing this. You gave up everything. Your organization, your reputation. My prison, Vincent corrected. I gave up my prison, and I'd do it again 1,000 times for the chance to be with you. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I love you, Emma Carter. I love you and your fierce heart and your brave daughter and the way you make me want to be better than what I was. I love you enough to burn down my entire world and build a new one in its place." Emma's tears came then, hot and fast, but they were tears of relief and joy and overwhelming love for this complicated, dangerous, redeemed man. "I love you too. So much it terrifies me." "Mr. Vincent," Lily came running over, launching herself at him. "You came back. Did you bring me a dinosaur book?" Vincent laughed, swinging her up into his arms. "Not yet, princess. But how about tomorrow we go to the biggest bookstore in the city and you can pick out 10 dinosaur books?" 10? Lily's eyes went wide. "Mommy, did you hear? 10 books." "I heard, baby." Emma smiled through her tears, watching Vincent hold her daughter with such gentle care, seeing the future they might actually have together. Mr. Vincent is very generous. 3 months later, Emma stood in the kitchen of Vincent's penthouse, now their penthouse, making breakfast while Lily practiced reading at the table. Through the window, Central Park was painted in autumn colors, the trees brilliant shades of orange and gold. Vincent emerged from the bedroom in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater that made him look younger, softer than the man in expensive suits she'd first met on that plane. He kissed the top of Lily's head, then Emma's lips before pouring himself coffee. "Morning meeting with the lawyers," he said, checking his phone. "They think we can have the last of the businesses fully legitimate within 6 months. The car dealerships are clean, the real estate holdings are being restructured, and the port operations are being sold to a consortium that has no criminal ties." "And your mother?" "Still disappointed I'm not giving her grandchildren fast enough," Vincent said with a smile. "But she approves of the changes. Says my father would have understood. Eventually." Emma leaned against him, marveling at how normal this felt. Domestic morning routine, discussions about legal businesses, plans for the future. "I got accepted to the nursing program at Columbia. Start in January." Vincent's face lit up. "Emma, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell me immediately?" "I'm telling you now." She kissed him. "And I've been thinking about your proposal." A month ago, on a flight to Miami, the same route where they'd met, with Emma working and Vincent in first class facing his fear, Vincent had gotten down on one knee at 30,000 feet and asked her to marry him. Emma had said she needed time to think, not because she didn't want to marry him, but because she wanted to be sure Lily was ready, that she was ready, that they were building something real and not just surviving crisis together. And? Vincent's voice was carefully neutral, but Emma could see the hope and fear in his eyes. "Ask me again." Vincent set down his coffee cup and took her hands in his. "Emma Carter, will you marry me? Will you let me be Lily's stepfather and give you the life you deserve? Will you trust me enough to build a future together, knowing where I came from but believing in who I'm trying to become?" "Yes," Emma said, smiling through sudden tears. "Yes to all of it." Lily looked up from her book. "Does this mean Mr. Vincent is going to be my dad?" Emma and Vincent exchanged glances, both a little overwhelmed. "Would that be okay with you, sweetheart?" Emma asked gently. Lily thought about it with the serious consideration of a 6-year-old making an important decision. Then she nodded. "Yeah, he gives good hugs and knows a lot about dinosaurs. Plus, he's not scared of anything except airplanes, and Mommy helps him with that. That's what families do, help with scary stuff." Vincent knelt down beside her chair. "Your mom is the bravest person I know, Lily, and you're just like her. I'd be honored to be your dad if you'll let me." "Okay," Lily said simply, "but you have to come to career day at school and tell everyone about your car business. And we need to get a dog. A big one." "Deal." Vincent ruffled her hair, then stood and pulled Emma into his arms. "How did I get this lucky?" "You got on a plane," Emma reminded him, echoing words from their first meeting. "You faced your fear, and you let someone see the real you. That's all it took." They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony in Maria Romano's garden, with Marco as best man and Emma's sister as maid of honor. Lily was the flower girl, taking her role very seriously and informing everyone that her dad owned 17 car dealerships and knew everything about velociraptors. Vincent still flew regularly now, board meetings in Chicago, business consultations in Los Angeles, family vacation to Disney World where Lily made them go on every ride twice. Each takeoff still made his palms sweat and his heart race, but Emma was always there, holding his hand, reminding him to breathe, making him brave. On their first anniversary, they boarded a plane together for their honeymoon in Italy. As the aircraft climbed through the clouds above New York, Emma looked over at her husband and smiled. "Still scared?" she asked softly. Vincent looked out the window at the city disappearing below them, The city where he'd spent decades building an empire of shadows, where he'd lived a life of violence and control and fear. Then he looked at Emma, at the simple gold band on her finger, at the future spread out before them like the open sky. Not anymore, he said, and meant it, because Vincent Romano had learned something that 3 decades in organized crime had never taught him. Real courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about finding something, someone worth being afraid for, worth changing for, worth building a whole new life for. And as the plane leveled out, cruising toward their future together, Vincent realized that the woman who'd once calmed his fear of flying had done something far more miraculous. She'd taught him how to live again. The turbulence that had brought them together had finally settled, leaving behind only clear skies and the promise of every tomorrow they'd face together.